This video is sponsored by Grey Tide Studio. One of the coolest aspects of the Space Marines is that they're kind of a blank canvas for you to tell your own story with them. Your guys can be vampire warriors clinging onto sanity by the most tenuous of threads that's about to snap. They can be Vikings whose savagery is kept in check by a strict code of honor. They can be blue. Or they can be hulking monstrosities wreathed in fire, but underneath it all they've got a heart of gold like the Salamanders. One of the best ways to add this flavor to your army is with the characters, and Space Marines have a lot of characters, like a lot of characters. Space Marines have more characters than some armies have units. They have so many characters that one of the characters, his only job is to be the lieutenant with combi weapon. And he's pretty good. Now Games Workshop has got you covered for picking up these heroes, especially if you're going with blue. But with a little imagination, maybe this box of Terminators, it's not that hard to make up your own characters. Especially with some extra bits. I love the new Terminators. I just love Terminators in general, and the new multi-part plastic kit does not disappoint. I clipped out the parts I'll need, particularly the legs and torso, to make some kind of a character in Terminator armor. I used a sanding twig to clean up the mold lines, and then I carved off the Imperialis off the chest with my hobby knife, blasting it with some more swipes of sandpaper to make it disappear. While gluing the model together, the Terminator kit is kinda monopose, with the legs and torsos keyed together. There is still some wiggle room for editing. With the legs I want to give him, I want an even wider stance. Space Marines are famous for having a pronounced cowboy squat, and I want to exaggerate this even further. I made myself up a ball of Greenaput, and I shoved this into the gap, squishing it down into his legs and then scraping away the excess. I first pressed it down into position, which squeezed out the excess putty. I cut this off, then reattached the leg with superglue, this time to permanently attach it, and I did the same operation on the other side. Terminators are pretty thick, so even though the putty is still soft and workable right now, I can keep going without messing it up. I used the point of my silicone sculpting tool to press in some ribbing for the undersuit, and it's like it was always meant to be this way, with the extra wide stance. It's a power pose. Now I have a blank canvas to fill with weapons and accessories, and that has been taken care of for me with help from Grey Tide Studio. Grey Tide Studio has a new Frontiers campaign for their Anvil Wardens 2, the second wave of fiery bits for taking your Marines to the next level. In this campaign, there are bits for the big chunky models in your life, and they are perfectly designed for easy kitbashing, featuring bits like extra leg and shoulder armor that is bedazzled with chains and decorations, extra big punchy arms with spikes and rivets galore, huge two-handed weapons with options for blasting your enemies both at range and in close combat, walker accessories for giving your biggest models that fiery dragon treatment, and speaking of dragons, look at these little guys. You can add a dash of cuteness to your lava warriors with these fun little pets flapping around. I have a ton of experience with Grey Tide Studio bits. They're always excellent and they decorate members of my Black Templar Crusade. They can really add a fun extra touch to make your minis truly unique. As part of the campaign, backers can get access to all the bits for the Anvil Wardens 2 and also from the first series, so you can have an absolute cornucopia of awesome extras to splash out in your minis. You can find out more about this campaign and check it out for yourself, linked in the description below. For my little fella, I'm thinking a Salamander Captain in Terminator armor. I loaded up his currently bare ankles with some thick superglue and stuck down some new shiny shins. Then I took some more Greenaput and stuck down a lizard loincloth right between his legs. I gave him some hip armor, and this hip armor gave me an idea. I took an extra one of these and I shaved down his belt buckle. I put down a little ball of green stuff and squished this right in the middle to give him an extra big belt buckle. All these bits really give me a lot of opportunity to add some more decoration. Moving up my guy, I took a necklace with some fiery tokens and glued this over the now smooth chest. And I found this cape that'll be the perfect thing to show that this guy is even more important than the other heroes of the first company. Now he's looking regal, but he's unarmed. It's time to fix that. I like this closed fist arm. I took some green stuff and shoved it into the armhole, then I cut and rounded this on an angle so that I could get the position of his arm just right. Then for his other arm, I took a bolter from the kit. I'm a sucker for WYSIWYG, and I'm also a connoisseur of storm bolters. It might be my favorite flavor of bolter weapon. With the arms on there, I stuck on some shoulder pads, picking some fun dragon scale ones, then I stuck them down to a paint handle for priming. Not forgetting that he needs a noggin, I like this bear head. It's always funny to see an unhelmeted head sticking out of the absolute slab that is Terminator plate. Giving this guy a final once over, I decided he needs a friend. I broke his power fist arm off and then swapped his shoulder pad for one that features a little dragon clinging on. This feels a little more appropriate for a captain of the Salamanders. All these bits work together to transform him from a standard Terminator into an epic hero. The Anvil Wardens 2 bits pack used in the video are out now on Frontiers, but all previous sets can be found on EonsOfBattle.com, printed for you. In the Space Marines, a captain is about as powerful as a single Marine can possibly get, and then a captain in Terminator armor pushes that even further. The Terminator armor grants a 2-up save, a save characteristic typically reserved for main battle tanks, but instead it's on this one guy. Although really the 2-up save is not the juice, the 4-up invulnerable save is where it's at. Even the guns that your opponent really wants to kill Terminators with are only going to be doing it about 50% of the time. Now my little Salamanders Captain needs a base, and I have tried many a time at some lava bases, and I think I'm ready to try again. The Captain in Terminator armor stands on the impressive 50mm base. I grabbed a cobalt keep base and sunk in my magnet, then got to work sculpting the volcanic rock. To make the base, I'm going to be using some cork, some thick 1/2 inch cork. I glued on a healthy piece and then gave it a second tier, putting down plenty of ultra thin super glue in between and then carving it into shape with my fingers. Then I added a second chunk for his other foot to stand on. It's always impressive for a model to be heroically standing on the pinnacle of a lava river, although it does imply that he's hopping from rock to rock, which probably isn't as impressive. But for the moment that he's giving a rousing speech or taunting his enemies, it's awesome. Now that I know where his feet will go, I can get him ready to be attached. I drilled some 1mm holes into his legs and inserted some brass rod, letting these stick out long. They have plenty of cork to stab into. And speaking of that cork, I pressed the sticks down into the cork to leave me with dents. Then I drilled into these dents so that he slips right into position. But I don't want to glue him down yet. It'll be much easier to paint these two parts separately. I have the rocks, but now for the lava. Bubbling, broiling lava should be wavy and uneven. And the best way to do this I know of is UV cure resin. I drip this into all the low spots of the base and push it around with a toothpick to fully saturate the surface. Once I had this layer down, I took my airbrush and blasted it with air to give me some rolling wavy textures, while at the same time shooting it with a UV lamp. The UV light makes it cure almost instantly, permanently preserving those irregular shapes the compressor air blew into the resin. I used a piece of tinfoil so that I could do each side of the base one at a time, then I let the whole thing sit under the lamp for a few minutes to finish curing. This gave me a nice smooth glass-like finish, which should be the perfect thing for some crackle medium. This stuff always separates in the bottle, so I gave it a few minutes of stirring to completely mix it in, then I slobbered it all over the resin. I laid it on really thick. I want some nice big cracks. Now that it's on there, I just have to see what it does. Now I've had very mixed results with crackle medium, either getting very little cracking or a ton of very tiny cracks. But I'm looking for those big juicy cracks, and so I've laid it on really thick, and I have heard that if you put the crackle medium in the fridge and let it dry so that it dries as slowly as possibly, that's when you get those really big cracks. So I'm gonna give that a shot. While the base is keeping my food company in the fridge, I can move on to the man himself. He's looking dapper with all his added bling, but this is gonna make painting a challenge. He's really busy, but I don't want him to end up a mess of details, so I'm gonna see if I can come up with a painting strategy that will let him shine through without needing to perfectly paint every single little detail. I stuck some silly putty into his neck hole to protect it from paint, then I blasted them with the black prime. And I can't forget about his little noggin too. Then I mixed up a nice green paint with some black to make my first layer, and I sprayed this all over him so that no matter where you're looking at him, you'll see a hint of green. Then after he was dark greened, I took some white ink into my airbrush and carefully highlighted him, hitting the raised portions of his armor. I'm imagining that this lava world he's currently standing on is a pretty dark place, so I left a lot of him dark, only spraying these highlights in a few key spots. Now to tint this color. I took some Shamrock Green Speed paint, a very bright green color, and I sprayed this through the airbrush. It doesn't do much over the dark green, but it appears extremely vibrant over the white. That's a lot of the armor taken care of, but this guy's also standing above lava, so I want some object source lighting coming from below. I flipped him upside down and then sprayed some more white paint from below. Basically doing the same thing, laying down some more highlights and then coming back in with some red speed paint, and I feel like this has given him a very intense light and shadow. I am loving what the airbrush is doing. To add a little bit more texture, I took my original green color and sponged this on to make the armor look worn and battle damaged. Now I can do some edge highlighting. I grabbed this Emerald Forest, light green, and I began hitting on all the edges, specifically the top facing parts. I went ahead and hit everything. Even though he has a lot of extra armor and detail, I think I can leave most of it green. The drama is going to come from the fiery scene, more than picking out every single bit. Once the green edge highlights were on there, I mixed some yellow into this color and I re-hit all the edges that I thought would be really catching the light from above. These are the very brightest spots of the model. Now a lot of them is finished. I hit the armor with the satin varnish to protect the work I've done so far. I've got the green armor on this guy all done, and it's looking pretty magical. That airbrush did a really good job. And now I've got to introduce some more colors and some more paintwork, but I've got to make it look as cohesive and consistent as the rest of that airbrushing. I think it's gonna be challenging, but I've got some ideas. I added a brown to my very limited palette, and I darkened it a lot with black paint, so it's as dark as the original dark green color. I used this to base coat the chains and all the gold bits on him, the spiky rivets of his arms, and decorations hanging from his chains. I also smeared some of this color really watered down onto his cape and the other scaly skin on him, base coating these spots to get them ready for more paint later. Then I mixed some yellow into this brown mix, and I began highlighting, doing some scratchy highlights that let plenty of the dark brown show through, brightening up these details a little. After this brown layer, I added some more yellow and I kept going with the highlights, putting on less paint this time. Then I added even more yellow and applied this color only in a few spots. Now for the brightest spots. I grabbed some ice yellow, a really light yellow color, and I just touched this to the gold bits, letting it be the brightest, most reflective spots. All of this was in preparation for some brass balls paint. I really like this color, but it doesn't have much coverage. But it'll actually be perfect for putting over the work I've done, and letting all of the value I've painted on show through. The underpainting was really to let this gold paint shine exactly how I wanted to. Now that the gold is done, the next detail to play with are the scales. I took some basilisk red and I began picking out each individual scale. This color is a pretty good match for how the airbrush red looks over the green body. And once I had something down on those scales, I added some yellow to this color and started highlighting. I want to reuse as many colors as I can so that the model looks really consistent. I thought that these colors were looking really good on the scales, and I decided to use the same palette for my little dragon friend, picking out the body and details, letting some of that dark green base coat show through. I highlighted up through my orangey red color, doing a few rounds of highlighting until finally adding in some bright highlights of yellow with just a little bit of that red in there for the brightest spots. Leave a comment if you can think of a good name for this guy. I'm thinking Smokey. He's really looking saucy. One thing that isn't as flashy is the Stormbolter. I mixed some black and ice yellow into gray, and I painted on some highlights, keeping it pretty dark and subtle. His bolter is just a tool, unlike the regal armor and decorations adorning his body. I applied some bright edge highlights of ice yellow, especially around the back, and the pig nose shaped barrels in the front. The ice yellow adds a lot of nice warmth to the gun, and in no time the detail was also finished. Now he's getting really close. The next step is some Cadian flesh tone. This is an orangey color that I think will be the perfect tool for blending and shading all over the mini. In the recesses of the green armor, this color turns dark. Over the scales, it creates some nice contrast between the natural texture, and over the gold, it darkens my recesses and blends my layers together, while keeping everything vibrant. I think it worked great. This guy is positively chunky. The Captain and Terminator armor can attach to Terminator's Classic or Assault Terminators, and Assault Terminators are kind of better. 4 wounds apiece with that incredible save characteristic is chunky. But I would argue if you're spending like 400 points on a unit, you probably want it to be able to perform both in the shooting phase and the combat phase. And that's where the good old-fashioned vanilla Terminator squad comes in. 10 Terminators with the attached Captain in Terminator armor. That is a lot of Stormbolter shots and Cyclone missile launchers. That is 48 bolter shots. Now that still doesn't sound all that exciting, although it's a little bit exciting because that's a lot of dice. You can start getting nuts with this. You make the target that you shoot your bolter shots at, the oath target, all of a sudden you're getting +1 to hit and reroll hits on all of those 40 shots. And then in the Firestorm Assault detachment, the detachment built around the Salamanders, all of those guns are gonna have assault and +1 to wound. All of a sudden, 48 shots that are rerolling hits, +1 to wound. That's a lot of dice. You hand your opponent 30 saving throws. It kind of doesn't matter what you're shooting at. It's gonna be a problem. And that's just the shooting phase. They all come equipped with a power fist, so in close combat, you can absolutely wallop something. They're not as tanky as the Assault Terminators with their 4 wounds, but they do have access to something kind of special in the Firestorm Assault attachment. They can have the enhancement that can attach to the Captain and Terminator armor, Forged in Battle. This is an enhancement that allows you, for the squad, to once per turn, ignore 1 failed save. You just treat it as a success. So that's pretty good. They got a 2-up save, 4-up invuln, and then once per turn, they got a free nuh-uh. I love a good Terminator, although it does feel like Games Workshop is definitely pushing on the upper limits of what numbers and math they have available to them to really show off how powerful Terminators are. They got things like the Scarab Occult Terminators who have a damage reduction mechanic, and then there's things like the Death Guard Terminators who have a feel no pain. And it starts to get a little silly of Terminators just never fail their saving throws, and it doesn't make for the most fun thing to play against. I feel like in the Firestorm Assault detachment, just the ignoring 1 failed save is a good enough buff. I think that shows off what the Terminators are without being really, really annoying to play against. Next up for my little Terminator, his face. And the Salamanders are weird. The Salamanders have charcoal black skin and glowing red eyes, a product of evolution from their gene seed of their Primarch Vulcan, who grew up on a volcanic planet. To get this started, I took some blue paint and I mixed it with black to get a grayish paint that still has some color to it. I painted this all over his face. Just like with the green armor, I don't want any of him to be desaturated. Once the base coat was dry, I mixed in some ice yellow into this blue mix to start highlighting up this color, painting it over his forehead, his cheekbones, his nose, his chin, and laying it on fairly thick so that only a little bit of my base color is showing through in the recesses. Then I did another pass with some more ice yellow, mixing in, doing smaller highlights, focusing on more of the front of his face. After that, another brighter layer, leave behind less paint, picking out the edges of his face. He's looking good, if a little bit creepy. Now for those eyes. I started out dotting them with some ice yellow so I have bright base to work off of, then I took my red paint and carefully dotted the eyes. With his face done, I hit the rest of the armor, using my green color to paint a little bit of the armor showing on his neck. And now he's done, it's time to put this disembodied face into position. I ripped off the silly putty and I put a drop of plastic glue into his neck hole and I teased the head into position. Then I remembered that the head is made of resin and that plastic glue is not doing anything. I carefully took some ultra thin super glue onto the tip of a needle and I dripped it into the seam so it was actually attached. That ultra thin super glue came in clutch and is also available from EonsOfBattle.com. Over there we have all kinds of hobby goodies, Army Painter paints, brushes, wet palettes, base and cork, ultra thick and ultra thin super glue, and we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we've ever made or the brand new one. New in January, we've created the Tomb Library, a set of hyper-advanced structures designed to quickly get a thematic defensive position up and running on the tabletop. The wall sections create an impenetrable fortress as they crackle with energy, floating just above the battlefield, and falling behind are the sarcophagus. Ancient tombs of forbidden power with room to display the aliens' captured trophies and macabre exhibits. This terrain was designed by us and is available from EonsOfBattle.com. I used the blue of his face to pick out the camera lenses on his armor, and now he's done. That is a Captain in Terminator armor. This guy was a rousing success. I really like how the paint job turned out. I wish I could say the same about the base. I took this guy out of the fridge after spending all night in there, and very little cracking. I put it on so thick, and most of it didn't crack, and the cracks are very small. I don't get it. Maybe the UV Cure resin is not as smooth as I thought it was, and so that wasn't letting it crack. Maybe drying so slowly didn't allow the cracks to form. Maybe Crackle Medium just knows that I'm trying to do it and it will not let the cracks happen. I don't know what happened, but this is what I got so far, and I gotta turn this into a nice lava base. I primed the base in black and then gave the cork a dry brushing of gray to bring out all the texture, and I did sponging black on top to make the rocks really dark. Then I took some white ink into my airbrush and I sprayed this all over the lava parts of the base. Even though the crackle paint didn't do much for me, I still like the gloopy texture of the UV resin. With the white on there, I sponged on some more black paint onto the boundary between the rocks and the lava, and I used a paintbrush to connect some of these blobs to make them bigger. This is to represent the liquid lava slowly hardening into something my marine can stand on. I took some red ink into my airbrush and sprayed this on the edge of the cork, letting it spill onto the lava. And speaking of that lava, I did some more sponging of white paint, this time to give the molten rock some texture. Liquid lava is still pretty crunchy, so I don't want it to be perfectly smooth all over. I sprayed the remaining white with some yellow speed paint to tint it. Then, wanting to push the color even further, I sprayed just a little bit more white paint in preparation for some fluorescent yellow. I grabbed my guy and sprayed just a little bit of white paint on him from below, so this color can be on both him and the base. I dripped some of this fluorescent yellow that I stole off of Nick's desk, don't tell him, and I sprayed this onto the base and onto the model. This is about as bright as you can get with yellow paint. With the base done, it's finally time. I loaded up my Terminator Captain's feet and pins with plenty of thick super glue, and I shoved him into the base for the last time. Then I hit him with a varnish and rimmed the base with a gloss black paint. This guy turned out sick. With his charcoal skin and his little pet dragon. It's crazy to think that this guy right here, started out life as this guy, but now it looks like this. Something I've learned about myself in my 40K career is I like big chunky models with big chunky rules, and Terminators fit that to a T. I have 25 regular vanilla Terminators, and I do one of these days need to get my hands on some of those Assault Terminators. And actually I do need some more Terminator Captains, because I have a few, but they're all old school. I want one of the new cool Primaris ones. I have the one from Leviathan, I just need to finish kitbashing and painting it up. This little salamander was tons of fun to paint. I don't get to paint nearly enough stuff green. Although, that might change in the near future. I've been tinkering around with an Eldar army, and for the craft world, I'm thinking Biel Tan, so I'll get plenty more opportunity to paint with a bunch of green. Let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of Terminators? Do you prefer the kill anything in the game aspect of Assault Terminators, or do you like the tactical flexibility of the vanilla Terminator? Also, if you're looking for cool bits, don't forget Grey Tide Studios. Thanks for watching.